And so I think people don't notice it as anymore, right? Like you wouldn't give someone chess and they're like, oh no, this is another murder simulation. This is a way of training like little like child soldiers. People would say that thing. And some video games end up in this very realistic pew pew first person blood splatter kind of place where I think it's much easier to say. But to me, there's still like there is so much abstraction happening in people's minds as they play that I care very little about these like visual like themes of things. They don't have no effects, but I think the effects aren't as strong. The thing that is much more important to me is like the dynamics you learn in this game, how it feels, how you behave, how other people, if you perceive something person-like, how you see them.
Welcome everyone, new episode. This very irregular podcast. I'm very happy to be with Alex today, Alexander Zacherl. If I mispronounce it... I
was going to say good morning, good evening. It's unclear when this comes out, so hello everyone.
Yeah, actually, yeah. We are doing it in the morning now, but it could come out at midnight and no one knows. Exactly. Am I pronouncing correctly your surname? Or
pretty respectably, yeah. Zacherl is the worst surname. It's not very easy in English-speaking countries.
Zacherl. This is German, right?
Yeah, it's Bavarian, so kind of like Southern German, or probably also like Austrians would also easily figure it out. But that corner of the world, if you give them a little sticky note with a name on it, they can pronounce it. If you use that in the UK, people are just very confused. Like the ERL combination does not exist like that.
Yeah, I think you just put R on it. I was more confused about the CH because I'm not sure if it's Zache or Zache or Zach. Well, yeah.
That's fine, that always works.
Okay, cool. I want to talk to you. I was actually telling you before because I usually focus a lot, or like I like much more board games compared to video games, or at least nowadays I play much more board games. I play video games mostly when I was a kid, not really much now. And I would probably at Imperial College, where I do this course, again think about the video games perspective. But I thought about talking with you because you work with it and you have way more experience, and interestingly you have experience both in video games and board games now.
True, but much less with board games, I would say. I'm much more of a newbie in that space.
Well, I think it's a interesting perspective to see, probably applying some ideas from video games into board games, or
Yeah, interesting that actually happened as well. We can talk about one of my games that I'm still trying to like get to the point where I can actually finish it, and that started out as a digital game and became a board game. I don't know, 10 years later. So.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, I'm sure it will come again. Let's not forget about it. I just wanted to start from the fact that on your website you say you are a systems designer. So I think if you could explain a little bit, what does that mean? And
yeah, it's a confusing term. If you tell that to people who like work in like tech or something, they think you're like an engineer working on back-end stuff, because they also use this term, systems engineering, systems design at times. The way I use it is kind of, actually, I'm not super sure where it comes from. I think like maybe like the kind of like 70s Club of Rome kind of people came up with this terminology for like people who design kind of like rules and incentives and like structures in a much broader kind of way. So like when I use this in a games context, I'm trying to say like I do game design, but there's a bunch of stuff I'm not good at. So for example, in video games, there's I would say narrative design, which is for some games very important, which I have very little experience with. Or there's stuff like level design, which is basically something like, I don't know, like architecture, but applied to video games maybe, which I have very little experience with because I very rarely make 3D games and stuff like that. So when I say systems design, in the video game sense, I normally mean rules, like the rules of the games, the gameplay, the mechanics, that kind of stuff. And it does translate over to board games nicely, because board games mostly only have that chunk of game design. They tend to not have a lot of narrative design, and very rarely have I ever seen anything like level design. So it kind of translates. Like, just in board games, I would say it just means design.
Yeah.
But it also kind of maps over to like non-game things. So I've done a bunch of stuff that is more like in like making software that is not games in any ways, or like tools and stuff like that. And here it's the kind of, like includes stuff like UX work as well. I would say user experience. So yeah, that's why I'm using systems design. It tries to like accomplish some things, but not some other things. But like any definition is a super fuzzy term, and like, yeah.
Yeah, so because a game is a system, right? In a way, in the sense that it's a collection of rules that agents that interact with each other, right? Or I'm not sure what's the...
Everything is a system. Nothing isn't a system. Like, everything is kind of like it's a little box with its internal logic, its internal goals, its internal feedback loops and other structures that is inside other systems. If you apply this lens, you see it everywhere. You cannot not see it.
That's why it's a bit confusing, I guess.
It's a very generic term. It's like design, like that can be applied to like a really broad range of things.
But would you say that you're a software developer though, because you approach system like digitally still, right? You like not
I called myself a scripter for the last 10 years or so, but not an engineer, because I can write computer programs, and I can write them much more easily these days by outsourcing that to like a machine learning system. But I can write code that does things on screen, but I'm not very good at like engineering the structure underneath it. It's much easier for me to work in an existing structure, kind of modify that. So these days I would say I do a lot of engineering work during my day-to-day on video games, because it's very rewarding and very nice and very easy if, as a designer, you can implement your own things. The feedback loop gets much faster than trying to like design something on paper, ask someone else to implement it, see how it is, and like iterate this way. But yeah, there's still a big distinction, I think, to me between like, I don't know, scripting, development, and engineering, maybe.
Yeah. So you usually work in a team, right? Like there are different people that have, you are.
Yes, like for me, always in basically all projects. Beyond, I think, actually every single game I ever worked on had a team. Like, the board games can be much smaller. Like, if you like, before the point that if you want to ship them to like a publisher or into manufacturing, the team tends to be very small. Can just be you, or can be like 2-3 people, right? In video games, teams tend to be bigger on average, because a lot more of the work in like building the initial experience needs a bunch of different skills to like that level of quality that we want to bring them kind of to. So like, we're working on a game right now, which is a small narrative game. I'm saying, like, it's a couple hours long, and that game has, I would say, about 6 people in the core team, and in the end, when it launches, we'll probably have about 20 or so people in the credits. And that's not a big game in video games, I would say. That's also not a tiny game, but like, yeah, that's definitely on the smaller side of things, I would say.
Because you need someone working on the visual, someone working on the music, someone working on the script, someone like either all different
exactly, right,
departments.
You look on the box for a board game, you tend to see a designer, you tend to see a
graphic designer,
like someone who like does illustrations, someone who does graphic design, and then maybe someone who's like very good in writing rules, and someone who's like kind of like editing. Like, that's another designer, I would say. Maybe that's like the 5 key-ish roles on like making the digital version of a board game. And then come a lot of people who are uncredited, who are like actually like building physically the whole game, right? And then shipping and so on. In video games, it's more apparent who all the people are working on the game, because I think they come into the process earlier as well. Like the manufacturing part, which in board
Yeah.
is quite separate, I would say, it's kind of like a second step process. In video games tends to be completely integrated with the design phase of things. We also tend to do something like pre-production and then full production, which maybe maps to like the design and the manufacturing stages of board games, but not fully. But it tends to be much more integrated, and it tends to be inside the same entity that makes the whole game. Like the studio that designs, develops the game, and sometimes often publishes it as well, tends to have all of that in-house, instead of that being like a second group of people with specialized skills somewhere who are like really good at like running a machine that does like, I don't know, printing or die casting and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
People in the game design and game development process who have like artistic, I would say, or engineering skills in different flavors.
Did you always work on video games, or like it's something that you started early on? You did other things as well that are like unrelated, like related to software and AI, but not strictly related to video games, right?
It's been a very like on and off kind of thing. I started out like I went out of high school with the plan of running a PR agency, public relations communications agency for video games, because I
Okay.
really like video games, like playing them, but I wasn't aware that you can actually make them if you're like a human, as an individual person or a couple of people. It was always to me like, obviously you need like 100 million in budget, you need 100 people, then you can make a game. Only in like 28, 29 did it become apparent to me that you could actually make games. So I changed over after school to like from
Even
selling to the making part.
even if you don't have billions, there's also a way to make them with a reasonable budget.
Which kind of has always been true, I think, for video games. Like the very first game productions was one person in the bedroom kind of, and that was a long time kind of. Then came this like big professionalization, and like most of the like visibility went onto like really big teams. Small teams kind of weren't much there. And then 28, 29, a lot of games came out, like Braid, World of Goo, Limbo kind of, where it was like really small teams. It became apparent that you can't do this again. And that I think hasn't gone away. That's in a really solid state these days as well. There's many small groups, like teams of people or individuals who are like really good and can do everything, who can make full games kind of. So yeah, I went into this from I'll be able to sell games, I guess, to, oh wait, it's much more fun to make them. I was in the first game studio that I started right after school, was the guy who did communication, like project management, business, finance, that kind of stuff. That's what I thought I could do. And then as our project progressed, kind of, I did more and more and more design work. Like first I did just user testing stuff, and then I did like some of the interface kind of stuff, and moved myself more and more to like the design part of the work, because that's what was the most fun to me and the most interesting and the most unique, I think, as compared to things you can do, right? So
more creative, I guess, as well.
yeah, but like everything is creative. I like I still spend, like for this project I'm working on, spend a significant amount of time on like the marketing side of things, which is also quite creative. And creative solutions you also need when you do producing, so project management and stuff like that. But game design is unique in that it is very easy because it's a fun thing to do with a really quick feedback loop. Like the main thing it does is you make something, you show it to someone, they react, you make another version, you show that, like you give that to someone, they use it, they react, and that cycle is really fast and really easy, even more in board games than in video games. And that's easier than for many other jobs. Engineering is a slower feedback loop at times, marketing is a slower feedback loop, and so on. Project management is a very slow feedback loop, because if you fuck it up, you notice 3 months later or 6 months later.
So when you design, like, let's say a level of a video game, or like, you mean you get quick feedback because there's someone else who's testing it, or yourself, you're testing it quickly, and you discover if it's fun, if there is some issue here or there.
Exactly. I think like design in general is the practice of making something letting a human use it and see how that affects them, and then changing thing, right? And it's purely that iteration cycle, and you do that with yourself as you're developing things. Like you're the only person you always have access to, so it's the quickest kind of like feedback loop. And then you like do this with like someone who's like nearby, maybe a colleague, maybe a friend, maybe your partner, and then you like go to like some random person who said, yes, I'll test your game. And like, I don't know, these cycles become longer, but like the core is always the same thing. Make a thing, show it to someone, see how they react, and change the game based on that. That's what makes making games so fun and so easy, in my opinion. Again, fun because you get direct feedback, you get feedback from your actions, and you see the reactions in other people. And that's inherently, I think, very fun for most people. And easy because that feedback loop is there. The reactions are mostly direct, kind of. There are some very rare cases in games where, like, say, you design the economy for a massive online game where the feedback loop is quite delayed. That's why these things are quite hard to do. But the vast majority of game making is fast, slow, like quick feedback loops, and that makes it much easier, much more fun.
Okay, so what's your favorite video game? Like, what kind of video games have you played? And board games as well. So let's get into also the comparison between the two. Just from a personal perspective, like what do you play rather than what you've designed? We'll get into that as well.
Yeah. So my one answer is there isn't a favorite game, because I tend to play most games once and then I'm done with them. I, in 25 years, haven't replayed really games much anymore. I'm mostly interested in new things. And once they don't feel new anymore, I'm kind of out of that thing. I filled out a survey a while ago where someone asked about like what the most influential games on me were. And I picked this online role-playing game, this MMO called Shadowbane. Was about 20 years ago. It was not very successful. Only a couple 10,000 or 100,000 people played it. Very unsuccessful back in the days. And that was a game that was all about kind of like being in this like very hostile world with other people. Most people will try to like kill you and steal your stuff, but some people won't. And there's a really nice thing about kind of like this like positive surprise of like a stranger in a really like hostile system, because the system like is set up to be very hostile to everybody, kind of interacting with you in a positive way, and like building your own group of people that you do stuff with. So that was a very influential game, I would say, on me.
A bit of history of humanity in a nutshell.
And it's also a nice way in like learning how to like set up like things that you do with a group of people, like setting up a studio or a company or something is not very different from setting up and managing like a guild in an MMO, a genre that really doesn't exist that much anymore, but is very similar to me. So it was very like both instructive, I think, as well as interesting. And again, like it was a very social experience, right? And that at a time when I was like 15 or so, where the main thing that's important, I think, for you to generalize as a human is connection to other people, especially people roughly your age. Like, yeah, very, very important.
I was just thinking, I mean, there are many things we could talk about, but I was just thinking that you said that it wasn't very successful because it was like 100,000 of people playing. And to me, it feels that if you said this thing about a board game, it would be very different. Like I wouldn't call it unsuccessful. It's an interesting
very different difference, right? Like it depends on how much you invest, right? I think it depends on two things, right? One is how much you invest, and B is what your running costs are. So like for a video game, kind of, if you are only like the side that is before the marketing of things, you still have costs in the, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, probably millions, likely, just because people spend a lot of their life working on this kind of thing. So you need to make a certain amount of money back, kind of. So you need to like, enough people need to give you money for this game, which for board games is slightly different. But also some of these games, like the games that I liked playing back in the days, have running costs, right? They had servers, They had like a live team that continued to develop that team. They had like community management team, many things. The costs that in board games are currently like on the publishing side, but honestly, those publishers are very small companies. They're very like even the bigger like even the mid-sized ones that to us look medium-sized are like
Yeah,
mom and pop shops to some degree.
yeah, pretty small.
Yeah. So
But I would also say that distribution could be different. I mean, nowadays it's definitely different, but it's probably easier to um, yeah, to distribute a video game than a board game for like just a reason that like physically it takes less space or zero space.
I
I'm not sure if that.
thought this morning, I think that's literally the most defining distinction between those two media as it comes to like making them is how distribution works. Where in video game these days, everything has gone digital. And so it's generally a platform that takes a small cut and does visibility, the player. It's a two-step process, right? And the platforms that we have on the PC, which is Steam and itch, and a couple others that don't matter that much, tend to be not very strong in gatekeeping. They'll accept your thing, they'll put a little bit of like visibility on your game, and if people like it, they'll show it to many more people, and you're good. That's it. It's still very hard to market these games. There's still a bunch of stuff you can do. There's a lot of noise, randomness, whatever, but the barriers to entry are pretty low. Versus in board games, there are so like they're like there is most games still I think go through like brick and mortar kind of stores who then get like stuff shipped by distributors who need to get pitched on by someone else who needs
Yeah.
people. There's so many middlemen in here which all take a massive cut A of the profit and B remove you really far from your like players at the end, and that makes it just so much harder. Plus manufacturing, right? Which
Yeah.
again is massively delayed process where many things can go wrong, like late in production, which again makes the feedback loop much slower. In a video game, I can make a mistake and I can patch it like on the same day. In a board game, if that thing is wrong, it's wrong for the next 10 years until you make a new batch.
Interesting. I wasn't thinking about this. But is there more risk of having a sort of monopoly for video games then, compared to board? I mean,
Yep.
I'm thinking now Asmodee is probably getting a similar monopoly in board game. But other than that, as you said, maybe the fact that there are more smaller companies and more middle
Yep.
steps maybe makes it a bit different.
Asmodee's power is tempered by them not having the direct customer relationship at the end. They still have to pitch their games to like a bunch of other middlemen in physical locations who then put their games like in store shelves, kind of. So they're massively tempered. And you're absolutely right. Since in digital markets, there tends to be one big platform in the end that everybody flocks to because of economies of scale and many other things. That gives them so much power that they very easily can fuck shit up in bad ways. At this point, I would say Steam and PC games is kind of a benevolent dictator. Like, I think they're doing reasonably well right now, but there's no guarantee this will stay like this. Like, at the point where the current owners of Valve die and their children and or a hedge fund takes this thing over, it very quickly probably goes really bad. Like, they will squeeze the vast majority of profits out from them. Right now, they take their 30% cut, and they do a decent job of like trying to like give a lot of like games a chance. But that is very likely to go away, like with all of those big platforms. The only hope is that like new platforms kind of come up and like take over, take this market over again, and that there's a bit of kind of iteration through that. But yeah, massive risk from centralization, massive.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, this is another thing that it wasn't planned to talk about it, but I just can.
I
Things
talk
come.
about the risks of centralization. We can go there at any time.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, but I think interesting stuff just comes to me and comes to you as we talk. So okay, yeah, that was probably one of the central ideas, like the difference between video games and board games, and I think we can get more into that, especially in terms of design. I mean, we talked about the production, let's say, the process, but before then, the design process. Oh, you didn't say if there is any board game that influence you, or maybe if there is some board game that actually pushed you from video games to board games, or I mean to yeah, to explore something different, or not, or maybe what did actually
Uh, I,
bring you there?
wait a second. I was just gonna. I was just trying to find out like what is a game that.
Can you put it more at the center? Because I think, yeah, exactly. Okay.
But it's not
Alpharouse. I
really,
have no idea.
not
What
really.
is this?
This is a box of I want to say 80 cards. Yeah, 80 cards from 1 to 20 that my family has played. Like my extended family, mostly on my dad's side, has played this. I would say wizard-like card game for I don't know since I remember, kind of. So most I don't know many people in the space know Wizard, kind of its trick taking game. And basically there's a like I say a folk variant of that game that has slightly different rules. That is much older than Wizard. I guess that's where Wizard comes from. It's just an iteration on this kind of concept. And we played that, I think, with my family, my aunts, uncles, cousins, and so on, for many years. And so there's been a bunch of these kind of games, different cards game, different trick taking games. There's a couple trick taking games that are very popular in Bavaria that we played a lot. I played a bunch of like more abstract games, I would say, with my grandpa when I was a kid, and then all the usual stuff that kind of came in. I think when I was a kid, kind of like Settlers of Catan became a thing. Of many Euro games. Tikal, I really love Tikal. It's a Wolfgang Kramer game about the things that Germans made games about in the 90s, which is going into the jungle, stealing a bunch of gold, and like bringing it home. Yeah, that was the topics they had, and they're making some of those. Ignoring that, was a really nice game to play, kind of.
How's it called? Tikal.
Tikal, yeah.
Okay.
I think I've seen it's like 20 years, something, 25 years old. They're doing a second edition, third edition, whatever. I think I've seen something like that last year. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah,
Uh,
those games.
but the game you designed recently are abstract, right?
Mhm.
Or yeah, mainly abstract, or because I think that's the reason why probably we met the
Mhm.
first time.
Yeah. Well, I would say the games that I like, the one game over here, Entangled, that we just managed to sell to a publisher who's now going to actually produce it. And then the other game that I over here, which has gone through many names, was Push at the very beginning. Those tend to be abstracts because those are just easier games to make. They're much easier games to design. They're much harder. They're not very easy games to sell because they're commercially
Niche.
very smart in many ways. But they're easy to make and finish because if you only need one other player or like two players for a play test, then this tends to go quite fast. If the game is short, it has very few rules, it tends to go fast. You can just iterate fast. Everything always, like it is a very general term, but like everything always boils down to the speed of iteration and like the speed at which you can gain new information. This is where like board game design and everything is pretty close to like things that are important in machine learning. If you can quickly figure out if you're doing something right or wrong, then you make a small change to that and you follow along the things that seem to be more right or better, kind of. It is amazingly easy to learn basically anything, kind of, most things, kind of. And so that's why making these like small abstract board games goes faster. It's just easier. I also have a bunch of like concepts and prototypes, like many abandoned prototypes or half abandoned prototypes for much more complex games where I need 4 people or I need 6 people or whatever. And they have many different pieces, and I have to like cut out the little pieces every time I make a new iteration or print them or something like that.
You need 2 or 3 hours just to get people into it,
Exactly.
scratch the surface.
Versus the advantage of making board games tends to be like, if you're lucky, you just have the game with you with the pieces and you change one rule, like you just tell people a slightly different version of the rules, and now you're playing a different game and it feels very different. And that's so easy to do. It's cheap, easy, fast, and it just makes it much easier to make those games.
Okay. But do you also have do you also feel is more pleasant to play this kind of games, or like, because video games are very different in a way. Like there is a lot of narrative. Well, can be a lot of narrative um, on top of the mechanics, of course, which is crucial. But yeah, because you're talking a lot from the designer point of view, which I understand.
Mm.
But I'm trying to think also if there is a pleasure that comes from playing certain type of games, or
Yeah. So for me, the games I play tend to be quite similar to the games I enjoy designing, which means in board games, I love playing something where it takes 5 minutes to learn and like 15 minutes to, I don't care, it's an hour to play the game. Like if there's no setup time, I'm happy. So I often end up playing like small abstracts. When I go to a board game store, I get the smallest of boxes. I have a bunch of the Oink games now.
well, put it in the center. Sorry.
Hello,
Thanks.
Mr. Oink game.
Okay, I've never seen this one.
Oh, it's great.
Deep Sea Adventure.
Very, very backstabby game, kind of tragedy of commons game. It's very good. You learn about humans and human behavior.
Okay.
But like these games are generally like you set them up in 2 minutes, you play them in whatever, 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and the rule explanation takes like 5 minutes. And that's great. I love playing this kind of game. I had that was a while ago, like an evening of playing games with a bunch of other board game designers, and I think we played 8 games in an evening, in not a very long evening, and that's my optimum. And if I play video games, I end up in a similar kind of space. I play lots of like games I can download quickly. They tend to be something like a roguelite or something like that, a small strategy game or something like that. They tend to be single player these days and not multiplayer anymore as back in the days. And I can just very quickly kind of like learn some new rules by playing.
Mm-hmm.
There is no big setup. There is no big download. There's no big patching. There's no understanding really like not even complex, but complicated things, many things,
Mm-hmm.
or I just start playing and I just trying out these systems. I win, I lose, I fail, I try again, kind of some other time. So there's been a big trends, I would say, in video games that have more of these kind of you play for a little while, you have a run, and then you fail, kind of, and then you try again from the beginning thing. Yeah.
I know very little, to be honest, about video game. I should come more prepared. But what about something like StarCraft? Is something you consider very complex, or because some people consider it like sort of the chess of video game? You know, something like that.
So StarCraft has high complexity, as in many things can happen that are hard to predict, and there's a lot of like nuance and skill. But it also has very high, I'd say, complicatedness. Like the barrier to
Learning curve
start,
is
but not just like, there's the learning curve. Let's say the learning curve, right? The barrier to entry is really high, kind of like you need to learn about a lot of like different units and stuff, and B, you need to pick up like a bunch of like physical skills to be able to play that game well, right? Like StarCraft is very strongly dominated by physical skills, and B, kind of like multitasking skills and stuff like that. And that makes it really hard to like get into that quickly and good at this. Yeah, that's just it literally, I think, requires a lot of practice to get to the fun stuff, kind of.
okay.
Like a small abstract game to me does not have any of that. It is literally just like you start interacting with the game and you find the nuances in that space like pretty organically, with a lot of like that nothing's blocking you from getting there.
More what some designer call it like a elegance, sort of like trying to decrease the number of rules, but without decreasing the complexity or the potential.
Exactly. Though for some reason I never got into Go, which is still one of the most elegant games. But I never got into this because the experience never felt like that to me. The game I played recently that wins that for me is Hex, which is a pretty small, pretty basic abstract kind of, but that to me had probably the fewest rules ever, kind of like.
Yeah, it's
And
probably the simplest.
exactly. But I really liked it. Like that to me had some very nice dynamics, and that to me felt very elegant. I don't think it hits the like complexity of Go, kind of, but very nice.
Well, one thing about Go, but also Hex actually, is that the complexity can scale with the size of the board.
Yeah.
I just like if people played only 9 by 9, I think it wouldn't be considered such as like a deep, also on a human psychological level, and some other games scale much better than others.
If Go would be developed today and didn't exist, I'm not sure we
Yeah,
would ship it on this giant board that makes these like really long, drawn out games. Kind of. I think that's true for basically all games that were like board games that are like old and successful. They clearly haven't been designed. They kind of evolved, and they're where they are because people know them and people like them, kind of. But they have a lot of these like
yeah. I should take notes because there are a lot of things coming now to my mind. But there's two things actually. One is the difference between board games and video games as a definition,
yeah.
in a sense that you mentioned that for StarCraft you need some dexterity, basically skills in there, and that's pretty much necessary to play the game at a certain level, right? You cannot enjoy the game really if you're not. And in terms of the definition, actually, a video game, what I always think is that you need dexterity there that you don't need in board games. So like if you can a board game you can play digitally,
Yeah.
but you can technically playing just with your mind, right? You don't need your hands to play. While in a video games, it has to be there. Otherwise, I wouldn't consider it a video games. Maybe there are some exceptions in both like cases, but I kind of that's my sort of the definition. 99% of the cases, yeah, that's the difference. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I haven't thought about like definition of game in like about 10 years or so, but it literally right in like a mailing list yesterday something about that. Because the definition of what is a game was a big thing in the video game space 10 years ago. It was both like a political discussion, but also like based on like I would say scholarly discussion. People have tried really hard from like the academic side of things to define what is game, what isn't game, and then some people took what isn't game as like a very exclusionary kind of approach, which is understandable, and that's not what I hope that's not what people wanted. But yeah, it's like to me, game is a really hard thing. It's a really hard thing to define these days because the range is so wide. Like even more in board games than in video games, the range is so wide. There's so many different experiences that all are very different in how they feel and the skills that you kind of need. Like if there is a new blog post by Ralph Koster who's tried to like define games for the last 20 or 30 years, and he's probably one of the best of like summarizing the state of things kind of. And I think he's still in the mind space of where games are all just like fun problem solving of some flavor.
No, I mean, okay, what is a game is even a higher level,
Yeah.
but I don't even know if it's useful in a way. I mean, some people would argue it's useful, some other it's just philosophical.
I have video games and board games. To me, right now, board games are things that I will probably physically put on a table, and video games tend to need a device that needs power. That's maybe the only distinction I really make, because there's so many like turn-based video games that like do not have a skill component other than click with mouse, which again is a skill that people need to learn, and so many people cannot play those games because like never picked that up, right? And there's many board games that read like I know lots of like manual dexterity, or like at least not many, but there are as a good.
Yeah.
So like I find it hard to separate like this. Like the smaller kind of like sub genres tend to be a bit more descriptive about what you actually expect inside that realm.
But yeah, maybe what you said is a bit more precise. Like if you need the digital support, if you need,
Yeah.
then I think we can be fairly certain it's a video game.
Then on the other hand, right, like basically every board game can be transformed into a video game.
Yeah,
And sometimes that's better because a lot of board games
or fiddly.
you just execute the rules of the game, right? Once you like notice that you're executing the game's rules and not your own choices, you like probably should think, this probably should be a digital game anyways, kind of. Yeah. I think, but it's often more about the experience. I think like the physical experience of doing a thing in a physical space tends to me the thing that defines a board game. And yeah.
That's another topic, I think. I mean, it's probably very different now,
Mm.
but maybe there's still some uh, part of the public or of the people who demonize a little bit the video games compared to uh, other form of entertainment or education, or let's say.
Yeah.
Um, do you experience that sometimes, or or you feel it's very different, that doesn't exist anymore,
Lots
or
to work on. So the thing that surprised me is that I was in Paris a couple of weeks ago, and there was a person who was the head of okay. There's a person who represented like an organization that like represented video game developers in France,
Mhm.
and they said something along the lines of, yeah, we still have to fight to explain to people how games are an art form and an important artistic medium, and they're not just like I don't know, training killers and like I don't know, trash. And I was like,
Yeah.
this discussion happened in Germany 20 years ago, and then it stopped. I haven't seen it since. To me, we've now hit the
Okay.
point where people are like, games are a medium, games can be art, games are like it's I don't know, it's that hasn't been a thing for me anymore. But I think maybe some people are still fighting these like little cultural wars about like what a good medium and what a bad medium is because
Hmm.
one is newer, one is older.
Hmm. Yeah. No. Okay. Because I think I heard recently. I don't remember where, but um, did claim that violence is usually overrepresented in video games compared to other games or board games or even other media. And I'm not sure because I don't know what if there are data about this, and if it's true, if it's actually problematic or not, or it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the way we can so like I think this is probably true for a definition of violence that is very kind of visual narrative, right? Say you play chess where the rook takes out the queen.
yeah,
That is clearly like battle violence killing, right?
yeah,
And a lot of
yeah.
video games are somewhere in that space of like you move your troops around, you like you're an adventurer who has to kill monsters. Like many,
More realistic, let's say.
yeah,
Right, like the,
I would say that like I would say two-thirds of all video games have some flavor of that thing. Maybe more. Maybe it's 80%. It's a lot. It's a lot less. And I think it's a higher, maybe a slightly higher ratio than in board games, but I'm not sure. But like that is very abstract, and so I think people don't notice it as anymore, right? Like you wouldn't give someone chess and they're like, oh no, this is another murder simulation. This is a way of training like little like child soldiers. People would
yeah,
say that thing. And some video games end up in this very realistic pew pew first person blood splatter kind of place where I think
yeah.
it's much easier to say. But to me, there's still like there is so much abstraction happening in people's minds as they play that I care very little about these like visual like themes of things. They don't have no effects, but I think the effects aren't as strong. The thing that is much more important to me is like the dynamics you learn in this game, how it feels, how you behave, how other people, if you perceive something person-like, how you see them behave. Like this game here, I'm showing it again. It does not look violent to anyone at all. It's got a
Mm,
little boat on it. You're gonna have like little characters that like try to like dive for treasure. This is a very backstabby game in a kind of like dog eat dog world where you're all pretending to get along until you're like there's only one winner in the end, so you have to backstab other people at the end.
mm,
That dynamic is much more interesting to me if people took that too seriously and they projected the real world like that onto the real world and they start acting like every interaction is like a prisoner's dilemma or like a treasure
mhm.
commons. That's much more dangerous. But like that's not something that people like even see or consider.
Okay, well, that's an interesting idea because, yeah, I always, I mean, I don't demonize video games myself, but maybe I'm a bit more sensitive to the realism of some video games, or in general some horror movies and stuff. So I get it's maybe the feedback is quicker, right? Like, it's as soon as I see it, I know that's probably not for me, or that I know that has an effect on me.
Yeah.
And maybe, as you say, other games that have some different sort of dynamics, it takes more time. You need I can't, I can't know until I actually play it, and that's a bit more sneaky
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah, yeah. I never watch and very rarely play horror games. Like, I really don't like them, but most of them I would say are less dramatic to me to think about than, like, say, a Settlers of Catan or something like that. Yet another, there is an empty world to, like, go steal whatever you want, and everybody else is your enemy, but you're always the good guy, kind of. This is much more, I think we should, like, honestly, that has happened. People have thought about this, luckily, for the last 15 years, and gotten much better at this. Like, it has to.
I mean, and I'm sure there are studies as well. I don't know much about it, but there are studies about how dynamics and how the realism of some video games has an effect. And I don't think it's probably, like, the conclusion are not either straightforward, or are not as bad as we as some people think.
I literally haven't seen anything like that in 10 years anymore, interestingly. There was like a time where, like, academics were like, let's put people in front of, like, violent video games, let's put them on, like, little head, like, eye tracking devices, and maybe like a neural head or something like that, or like, let's do long-term studies with them, see how they change. I haven't seen much come out of this that was in a way kind of like, oh no, this bad.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's probably means there's no. And also,
yeah.
I suppose we will see some bigger effects at this point after 20 and more years of this that are very widespread, like, compared to, I mean, like Catan or Risk are also popular, but not as much as probably tons of GTA or other video games were.
If we want to sound the alarm, maybe we sound the alarm again about, like, just like single player gambly games that you play on your phone, where everything is just like a little feedback loop that, like, tries to give you endorphins, then takes them away, so you pay. Like, there's a lot of like bad stuff happening in that space that I think does have, like, long-term effects that are seeping in.
Yeah, I'm actually quite scared about that. This introducing gambling effects, some the gambling's dynamics in otherwise seemingly naive, innocent games. Yeah.
That's why I went to make word games, because to me they had a lower risk of being exploitative Skinner boxes, kind of. With video games, like, it is, you have to stray away from the, like, bad space of, like, give people these shallow experiences and pull as much money out of them as you can. With board games, that is harder. I think, like, a $300 on average Kickstarter project is also inherently reasonably stupid and evil, but it's capped at, like, $300 evil, and you create a bunch of useless plastic. Versus, like, I don't know, mobile games, like, have a, like, that go strong into, like, a gambling-ish territory, have a much higher impact, a much higher negative effect, I would say.
Yeah. I want to connect to something that I had in the notes, because I think it's relevant. You wrote an article, like, more than 10 years ago that was called "Mechanics Are the Message," which I think you still, it seems, according to what you say, you still agree with yourself of 10 years ago.
Yeah, it just haven't. Maybe I haven't thought enough about stuff to change my mind.
But if I understand well, you say that the narrative of a video game, or a game in general, but nowadays video games have a lot of narrative in there. I think they're almost movies with. There are a lot of video games that they seem like movies with your own choices in there, pretty much.
Though it's not the thing that is growing the most right now. I think the like more mechanically heavy games are more growing right now.
Oh, okay, that's an interesting thing.
Mm.
So yeah, you're saying that the mechanics shape can affect the way people think, or I mean, they have an impact. I'm sorry, I don't want to put any in your mouth words. I'm trying to
No, I find it very
to,
interesting.
to
Tell me what you think that it's supposed to say, and then I'll see if like if
it's
you remember what it was supposed to say.
okay, yeah, they have more impact than we think, basically. As you said, a game that talks about war doesn't necessarily make you think more in a war way, um, compared to how actually the game works. So the choices that you have to make, and yeah, what kind of feedback you have there, what kind of award, like reward, and yeah. I'm not sure if I explained.
Well, I make a lot of sense, but I think what I was trying to say back then was that like people when they did game criticism, both kind of like academic and journalistic, was like they focused a lot on like how it looks, like what like this is a game about shooting and these are semi-realistic characters, thus bad, versus this is a game with like QTL characters, thus good. And I think to me like the things you do, how it feels to do those things and what you learn about the world, what you take away, that's the actual thing that has much more effect on us as humans, kind of. I think we're abstracting away the setting and the visuals so quickly that they're kind of there to pull us in, kind of on the marketing side of things. They give us a certain fantasy that we like think we're going to get from this game, and then B, they help us kind of like frames things a little bit. But again, like this game here, if I take like the learnings from this game serious, then I will see the world in a very negative, scary way. Or if I play a lot of Candy Crush and like I internalize what I'm doing in there, I like a game like or just a slot machine. Well, let's say a slot machine is a game for the sake of the argument.
Yeah.
I will learn that nothing I ever do matters. The only thing that matters is the like randomness that comes.
Yeah. I don't think Candy Crush is very far from a slot machine, to be honest.
And
as far as I know.
there's lots of games that like try to like go in like different kind of flavors of that, right? Like so basically, but like the experience there is the thing that like informs me. If I play like I don't know, like there's a game that I played like 2-3 days ago called It Takes a War on Steam, which on the surface looks like Counter-Strike, like a bad Counter-Strike clone from like 20 years ago. And when you go into this without spoiling it too much, kind of, it becomes a story about what we can kind of learn about other people. And mechanically, it is just a book. It is like I go from page to page to page, and I don't ever have any influence myself on that kind of thing. So there's very different kind of like levels of what we can take from this kind of like, as I said, this game that I played as a kid, which was another like it's a fantasy world, everybody's out to get you, they kill you, you kill them kind of thing. Still, I learned a lot about like interacting with other people that I don't know, that I have never met kind of in the real world, and like the positives that like kind of come from that, the experiences that come from that, like the positive surprises. I don't know. So there's more than the surface level of what we see is like the things we do, the actions we take, and how that feels and what that tells us about like dynamics in the real world. Long-winded, but like that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
I still think it's true, actually.
Yeah, actually, I want to ask you also something about cooperative games, because I heard a few times, I've seen, I don't know if it's actually true, I don't have data, but there is a trend of having more and more cooperative games, or I don't know if it's more maybe not necessarily cooperative, but with less violent, let's say, less with where the goal is not necessarily to dominate or destroy the other players, but different kind of goals that sometimes they have to be played together. So I don't know if I can go that far, but maybe where empathy is a bit more involved, more than a QE is more important than a Q. No, sorry, IQ. EQ is more important than IQ. Things like that. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Is it true? Is it something that you see in video games as well? Is it something that I'm just imagining, or?
No, I think you're right that but again, I think it's kind of two layers. There's kind of like thematic narrative layer, and then there's the mechanical kind of layer, and both of those changed a bit. Where like early video games and early board games were all like, you're the guy, you fight the other guys. That was the narrative side of things, and the mechanic side of things was like, two go in, only one comes out, fully zero sum kind of. There cannot be one winner, right? And both of those things I think have changed. So we both have this kind of, that's pretty recent, resurgence of like, I'd say cozy games is maybe the best tag we have, right? In board games as in video games. But that's always been a thing in video games where ignoring the like mechanics, we frame things as kind of non-threatening, non-violent, friendly, and relaxing, like such as this. I'm not sure. This is Aspen's, was a recent Kickstarter, and they say it's a cozy two-player strategy game about growing tiny forests. And it is a two-player strategy game about growing tiny forests, but really it is a two-player head-on, zero-sum, nearly abstract game with randomness mixed into it. So the experience that you have, which is really cutthroat, is very different from the theme kind of. But then, so that's kind of theming slapped on top, right? There's also the other thing where like more video games and board games are either solo experience or cooperative experience, right? In a solo experience, you don't need anyone else. You're trying to fight the game, you're trying to beat the game, but it tends to like read as less competitive to people. And you have sort of like cooperative experiences where it's all of us together against the game, or it's just all of us together doing stuff. Like there is, I think, a growing genre in video games that is mostly about being in the same place with people you like digitally and doing stuff where even that challenge of we have to beat the game or that game is trying to like kill us or something goes away. So that's becoming more of a thing as well. I think as the people who play games are getting older and older and older, as the world starts looking grimmer, like more and more grim, I would say, people try to have this alternative a little bit.
So, okay. But let's say there are two different things. They could be together in the same game. So a game could be visually more colorful, more cozy, but not necessarily has to be cooperative on non-zero sum in a mechanic sense, or the other way around. Or none of them. So yeah, you can
have all these things, right? And then you come to concepts like ludonarrative dissonance as a concept says something like the way playing the game feels is different from what I expected it to be. Like if I get the cozy game about growing trees, and I give this to two people and say there's a really cozy chill time for growing trees, but then they just try to like cut each other to steal land from each other, that's a very different experience, right? Whereas there's a game about like it's a fun RV trip with your friends where things go wrong in fun ways. That's a new video game that came out kind of, and then it actually feels like that. That's the setting, but also the experience, like chaos, hijinks and shooting in front with your friends. Nice, it's together. And I think that's easier. Like it's easier from a marketing perspective and from a player perspective when those things fit together. I think you can keep them separate for like artistic reasons, I would say, but it tends to be easier if those two things come together.
But like the example that you show with Aspens maybe means that even if the mechanics are more cutthroat, they still try to dress it a little bit more to widen the audience, I guess, make it more family friendly, or I mean, not don't want to use stereotypes, but more women in board games probably prefer something less competitive, less that looks less violent. I think in video games it's actually pretty much even, right? I think I read a report like there's a lot of
Some numbers I just saw from French, their gender split was 47-53. So yes.
yeah
But I think like historically you're right. Like a bunch, like lots of games have been kind of like war game themed. Thus they only been marketed like certain group of people, mostly men, and thus kind of like a lot of people are like, that's not for me. That's not for me for many reasons, kind of. And then people are trying to go away from that because even this game, this is not an experience of war and hate. I play this
yeah
with someone, with my partner. We will like cut each other off. We will backstab each
yeah
other in this game. But since we're inside this like magic circle of video games where mostly everything is allowed, that's a really good experience, right? Like this is maybe a much more divisive game.
yeah
Social like backstabbing is something people
it's a bit different.
opt
Yeah,
into. Yeah.
you tend to confuse the game with the real life, sort of like it's kind of gets out of that.
The
A, a,
magic circle can like become like penetrated by some stuff more easily than other things.
a bit like a traitor, the TV show. I haven't seen much actually, but I should probably.
Every game with a traitor mechanic, like you, I think, want to like communicate that this is a thing and tell your players so they can prepare for this, and then it's fine if they notice. They'll be super happy, and these are my favorite games. I think my favorite board games have this kind of deception traitor level, but people really need to want this and know that this is a safe place to do so.
Is there anything else that I had some more questions about AI in general, but I don't know if you how you feel about it. If you want to talk about
As much as you want to go there, I'm happy to go there.
Well, just a little bit, and I think that we are it's two questions, but in general, how AI impacted in terms of game design. Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, I mean, the AI question in general, it's very broad, so I don't know if you want to go into that. Like, what do you think? Where are we actually going? But I think it's more interesting and more relevant to stay in the game realm.
Yeah.
But also practically, like, did it help you to? I'm sure it did help you to design some new video games or board games.
Yeah. So if we define AI as like current
large language model, let's say, I don't know how.
Current models that output mostly text, sometimes images, you put text and images in, and you can put them into like small loops where they create software for you. Like that's the highest extent of what they're kind of doing. They're very, very helpful these days. Yeah, like because it lets you do like more akin to software engineering than just scripting. So a lot of the like stuff you want to try out and build, you can do this more quickly. But I've also used them, and I've used that in the board game space and the digital space. In the digital space, like it's both great for prototyping and making the actual game. In the digital space, it's very nice to very quickly like turn any of those games into a digital version where you can play it remotely if you want, but B, you can try out a bunch of different bots and strategies. You can run the game a million times and see which starting setup has which effect on balance and stuff like that. So it lets you do these things very quickly that otherwise would have been harder before.
And also without knowing how to code very much, right? I mean, a little bit. You need something, but not so much.
Yeah, it depends, kind of. I think like to a certain, like it is still helpful to know many things about like code and computers and engineering and things to make those things more reliably, longer, better, kind of. But there is the entry bar is much lower to get something useful out, I would say. And you can learn this, I think, much quicker, kind of. And that's just making code. Making code has gotten easier to a certain level now. And the second thing that is also kind of good at, like I really liked using a bunch of different like LLMs for both kind of like ideation, iteration, rules writing, kind of. Like a lot of the like current systems are still quite bad at coming up with interesting creative ideas. The way they are kind of like trained and prompted makes them often, and you have to break them out of like quite generic and boring kind of, but you can get 1,000 bad ideas to react to. And like most of what creativity to me is reacting to things kind of. And so having 1,000 bad things to react to is really helpful, because then you come up with a good thing, and then you follow this good thing a little bit, and then you and you throw them into the machine again and say, make me a bunch of variants for that, or tell me how that's gonna fail, or like poke holes into this thing. So having this built-in kind of sparring partner that lets you like get to ideas and make those ideas better, like in the theoretical realm, is really helpful. That wasn't really possible before, unless you had like a creative partner, a human, to do this with. And those humans are probably not available like at like, I don't know, 4 a.m. when you can't sleep, and you're trying to think about like a board game or something.
It made me laugh a little bit when you said reacting to bad things as part of creativity. I was just thinking that in social media nowadays, it's posting something wrong, like wrong. There is something incorrect in what you say, what you show, attracts sometimes more people, because people love to feel they're right, in a sense, right? So I just thought that it's a different thing, but the analogy is that if you react to something bad, as long as you channel it into something creative and positive, could be useful.
Yeah.
What happened in social media is different. It's unfortunately 90% of the time not that. But yeah, I was just.
But I think it's not that far off, right? It's kind of like about how you use a tool, in what context, and with what level of control is the important thing. Because like the general negativity of social media is very similar to the general like news factors in media that have been, I think, I don't know, discussed since about 70 years ago. It's pretty obvious what the things are that people react to. One of the big things is like negativity, fear, scare, and surprise, many of those things. So that's, I think, why that works. But like the way I liked that I used this in the last year or two to like get to newer ideas is not the completely passive, just stuff comes in and like you go anywhere with it, but like you try to like go into a certain field, into a certain area of design space, right? You say, I want to do an X that is supposed to have the effect Y, kind of what options are there, and then stuff comes in and like, yeah, like the fact that those ideas are wrong, like are bad, wrong, generic, is not that big of a deal, because you're at least in like roughly the space that you want to be in. They are not completely random, right? Like as most of game design, it's about kind of like controlling randomness. Like you like, it's a bit of a detour maybe, but like a lot of games are kind of like give you something that feels random. We as humans like being surprised. Surprise is an interesting thing to us. You can argue that most games are about like surprise in a way, but it tends to not be uncontrolled randomness for a good game. A good game will give you something that feels random to you, but it's controlled by the designer to like come in a certain way, in a certain space, to give you a certain experience. And I think you can use the same thing to use these like reasonably non-deterministic machines, like language models, to like give you useful things inside a space that you can control, where you get enough randomness to give you like interesting inputs that you wouldn't have had before, but not veer off into stuff that is completely useless to you.
I would add also random, but I think that maybe that seems random to you at the beginning, but you learn how to control over time.
Yep.
Because I think if it's a game, it's completely random. At some point, people will not feel any agency, right? And but if they can learn something, maybe that's even a further step.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you want to find the pattern in the noise in order to get better. Like because again, it's about predicting patterns that like surprise you, but like surprise you in kind of good ways, positive outliers, negative outliers, and eventually you get a better feeling for what it's gonna be. Yeah. Also, I think we're very bad at making true randomness. Anyways, that's the good thing.
That's another topic. So this was large language model, but what about I mean, this was the most striking thing that happened for general public in the past 10 years, but or less, I don't even know. But before then, you mentioned machine learning. I mean, there is a whole
Yep.
deep learning. What happened with Alpha Zero, for instance, AlphaGo?
Yep.
Did that also have an effect somehow on the way you design games or you play games?
Mm.
Also, but like connecting to this, you also worked at DeepMind for some time, right?
Yep.
I don't know if that gets in the discussion or not.
Yeah, definitely. So like interesting, not how I play games. Like slight detour, like I feel that all games I play are still completely unaffected from the effects from this new technology, other than maybe some of them like wouldn't have been made as quickly and easily if you didn't have a lot of like code generation tools and a bit of other stuff. But like the way I design games, definitely, because like the reason for why I joined DeepMind some, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago was that they just released the AlphaGo results, and I was like, this is nuts. This is the game that has more options to play than grains of sand on a beach multiplied by the number of atoms in the universe. This is awesome, right? No machine can ever solve this. And here's the machine that doesn't solve it, but it is still perfectly, absolutely superhuman. So that gave me the feeling that this stuff is extremely powerful. Like this can do things that one wouldn't expect to do. I spent a bunch of time inside of that corporate organization, meeting some very nice people, meeting lots of very well-meaning people, but also learning a bunch of stuff about like, say, I know how humans learn, right? Like how machines learn is very much informed by how humans learn. At least we like to think that. We like to apply kind of like people liked to apply kind of like concepts from behavioral psychology or neuroscience and like get inspired to their machine learning systems. In the end, I know it turned out to be something more like if you have a lot of data or you can create a lot of data, you can create a lot of like feedback kind of, then these pattern matching systems, if they are big enough, they can learn most dynamics of complex systems, and we're still in the process of doing that. And it doesn't feel like it's gonna stop. It feels like this is continuing to at least human level in those things we care about, but probably more than that. I don't know. So like, not sure what I'm trying to say here, kind of, but like my gut feeling is like made me think a lot about like how humans learn and like how important feedback is. The reason for why I said that making like designing video games is easy is that I think it is a task in which we get lots of feedback very quickly, and we can make small, low stakes iteration on the thing we do and get closer to a better thing, kind of. The same, that maps very closely to what makes a machine learning problem tractable, easy versus hard, right? And so think about that, what you give your players with regards of like information that they have right now and freedom to explore. I think that's helpful.
That's what they do much faster than humans, right? Getting feedback in and spitting out something new.
Well,
and
we can give it to them fast enough, right? Like a lot of the domains that this stuff currently struggles in is one where like that feedback isn't available. At least not at this stage. These machines are very, 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 very inefficient still. On average, in like how quickly they can learn, how many examples of something they need to see to get better at it. It's not 100% true, but mostly. And so they would, I think they will, once you have good enough tools to put humans in front of computers, the machines would learn very quickly how to design video games that work. Once you have simulation of humans that react like humans react, you can make this loop even faster. So I think like digital game designer is not very far away. This is pretty close. But some other stuff like digital, like trying to make the economy go well is a very abstract concept. That's still a very hard thing because you have one world. You cannot really run many experiments. Your simulators are not good enough to predict the future at kind of a high level of precision, kind of. But that seems like a harder problem to tackle. And that's both harder for humans
Yep.
as well as for the
Um,
operating systems right now.
is because of the number of variables, you mean, like, or it's just we're not
But
very.
the rollout is slow. Say like I will change tax policy from n% to n+1%. Well, now let's wait 30 years and see how that plays out. Because yes, you're right, complexity, but also because like change is slow in the real world.
But then AI should be able to do something much quicker. Like we don't need to wait 30 years to see the simulation.
It can only do that if it has a simulation, but they do not have that simulation.
Oh, okay, I see. I see. There's not
On the simulations not being there.
and there's not enough data about the past that we can say, oh, this policy 50 years ago had this effect.
Exactly. There's a thing. There are things in machine learning on policy and off policy learning and many other flavors of kind of like imitation learning that have these issues of like you cannot generalize from just one path, kind of, right? This is the one historical path, but like that really doesn't help you tell how the future is gonna go. The way that this worked for like text models is like people took all of the text that exists, which is kind of linear, kind of, and also image models, and they found ways of like augmenting that data to make you ask specific sub questions, like what's the next word, for example, here, or what color should this pixel be, kind of, to make that like a thing in which you could pick up general patterns just from the past stuff that humans have created, but haven't applied the same thing yet to like all other domains. Another thing that is slower than people expected it to be, or maybe some people didn't expect, is robotics, just because like physical things need to act in physical world. That like has a lot of like, that's not fast as compared to machine learning standards, right? Where your stimulations in big clusters tick at billions of data points per second, something in that range, right?
And self-learning would also be very complicated, like if you want to apply to something like economy, like you did for Go.
Oh, self-learning as in self-play, kind of.
Yeah, sort of self-play.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the problem with like this. Like this is a pretty like that's why these abstract games are very nice, right? Like the rules are very simple, and you could throw in a second player. Like that doesn't affect really the rules at all in any way, kind of. Static, they never change, and like you can learn something from another player, even if they're only slightly better than you. But like apply that to the economy, like there's clear other player at this point, right? There is no easy way of simulating all of these. Like,
going back to what you said before about creativity, so we can use nowadays much better large language model, or I mean different machine learning, deep learning systems to simulate how games work, like in a sense that we can found flaws more quickly, balancing and things like that. But in terms of finding the right idea or understanding what would be fun for a human, we're still far. So if I understand well, we can sleep well for now. Like we can be
what?
or
I think so. I do not think so. I think close to that. I think automated game designer is very much in reach in the next couple of years, not far away. That is currently holding this back is that right now, if I let, like I've experimented with that a bit over the last like year or so. Like you can currently give the machine like a make me a game prompt, and it will make a game, and it will make newer versions of game. And like there is still some like put it in the right framework so making game is easy is a thing. Like I would probably let it make like a, I don't know, let's say make it a turn-based game in like HTML. That's easier than a first-person shooter in Unity for a bunch of reasons. But let's say we only do the easy space, kind of. The only, like the thing that is currently blocking it were like roughly two things. One is kind of trying out interesting things while not getting sidetracked. I don't know, like kind of like being able to follow a path and kind of think about if you're going in the right direction, which has gotten much better recently with like what people call like agentic code generation systems, agents. And the second thing that it is really bad at is just getting feedback in from someone else. The someone else in this case is a human, right? Like if you have your loop of the machine that like makes a new game, uploads it, a human plays that game, records their screen and face, the machine then gets that video plus voice feedback from the player. This is only an engineering problem, as in not a research problem where we don't know the solution. It is only an engineering problem. Someone needs to be motivated to spend the time and money to build this. To do this, we already have models that can take in hours of videos. There's a bunch of like minor caveats, but like,
so it's potentially, it's pretty much doable. It's just a matter of time, or if someone want to do it.
If your goal is like make a Candy Crush clone that monetizes better, I think that's pretty much in the realm of what's very doable these days, because there's economic incentive for it and it's not hard in any other way. If you say, make me a game that is very different from everything else and moves people in a very unique way, that's a bit harder, but I still don't put it past that.
Not impossible at all.
No, I think there, like, to me, there is not much. Yeah, like the push from these organizations is to be able to do everything a human can do first on a computer and then in the real world. And interestingly, the first jobs that go into this are kind of programmer and like machine learning scientists. Game designer is only a bit further away because it doesn't make a lot of money. And so people aren't very motivated to do these things. Once those things get much cheaper, like this will either like become a byproduct of it, or someone will just eventually do it, kind of. So yeah, it's not a safe job in any way or form.
Yeah, I guess the question is, what is going to be safe? Nothing, pretty much nothing eventually.
Yeah, I mean, like, if humans are in charge, then human services that other human want. The question is how many humans are eventually in charge when you automate the vast majority of all current jobs. Can you transition over into a world where you create new jobs that humans that are in control value so that other humans get to do them? That's the big open question to which I haven't heard any interesting answers yet.
There is also the thing that humans are still probably more interested in seeing work done by other humans in a way. So like if a game is designed by you, it has more value usually for humans than if a game is produced just if you come up with, okay, this was done 100% by an AI.
Right.
Maybe.
I
It's a philosophical.
I would say maybe, right? Like we see the first examples of this in music right now. I think one of the most successful, I'm not sure if I get this right, one of the most successful country songs of the last couple of months on Spotify and the Billboard charts has been completely AI generated. So there is, like, once things become indistinguishable, they're not qualitatively worse to most people. Has a human made this part becomes a luxury problem, right? Do I want to spend the extra money, resource on this thing? And this is currently true for rich people because they need a way of putting their money into status and value, kind of. But it only works if there are people who have money. Money is the short form for kind of like agency and control, kind of like. If those people exist, we can then value those things and we can make those things, right? If in the end we have like one person who really values 12 billion people making physical things and handing them to them, that's great, but that's a very unlikely future to stumble into.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, we ended with this optimistic note about the future.
Sounds good.
Well, maybe we'll chat again in a couple of years and see if things have changed, how they have changed. There's anything else you want to say, or
No, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed this. Thanks for asking a lot of interesting questions. I noticed that I didn't ask you any questions at all.
But it's okay, that was not the point.
Maybe let me ask you a question. Like, let me.
Oh my! I wasn't prepared.
I know.
I was prepared to ask question, not to answer.
No. But like, tell me, is there anything from what we just like kind of like covered that like stuck with you? Anything that surprised you? Anything interesting? Any takeaways?
Well, I asked you a couple of questions that were not in my mind before. I wanted to know your opinion about video games. I was curious about design of games, but done by AI. We just talked about because I think the only example that I had for board games was this software called Ludai that made by Cameron Brown, um, which worked, but didn't work so well, I think, as they expected. And but this is probably 10 years ago now, so I was wondering actually what will come next. Takeaway message? I don't know.
Are you gonna make video games? Are you gonna play more video games? Of them, will you play them?
I would honestly, I would play all the time. You know that. I mean, I would play everything all the time. It's just that. But actually, one thing that I wanted to ask, or I mean, I was
Mhm,
not surprised, but probably maybe we are a bit different in that. I'm not sure.
mhm,
You mentioned that when you play video games, you play mostly once and then that's it,
mhm,
and then you don't see them again for a long time. You tend to want to try something new, which is something that I experienced very much with movies. I can't say with video games because I probably don't play them enough, but I think I would have a similar feeling with video games too. While board games is a bit different. Well, actually, for me, it's very different in the sense that most of the abstract games that I play and I enjoy, I want to play them again until I'm I'm satisfied, until my level of skills reach a certain level, which I think is an interesting difference. And probably the design, I mean, of course, the designing a video game also should probably aim to get people hooked and maybe play again.
mhm.
But I don't know how common it is to replay a video game compared to replaying a board game. Maybe replaying a video game, I mean, also in terms of the number of hours you need to play. Probably, if you consider, it takes 20 hours, 50 hours to complete some video game, it's maybe the same amount of time that someone else would put in a board game just to dilate it in more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of video games are not what you describe. I think your mental model of video game is very much like movie or book. It's like a linear narrative thing, and then you're done. And the question is, do you rewatch it or not? Right? Like when I was a kid, I reread the same fantasy book series of 12 books 10
Hmm.
times. That was that kind of experience, right? I think
Hmm.
the vast majority of games by hours played are not that. They're very systemic kind of games where you either like you do multiplayer things or you interact with the system many, many, many times over, kind of. They're like playing the same, like they're basically playing games of Go over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That is the vast majority of games anyways.
Hmm. More esport sort
Not
of,
even esports. It's
not necessarily.
even single player games. Like again, like the big thing that came out over the last 10-ish or so years are games we call roguelites. These tend to be games that have like short rounds in which you play, in which you make interesting choices, and then you fail, and then you start again. And maybe there's like a light meta progression on top of this kind of, and you just play that again and again and again and again in many, many, many variations. It's a similar experience to playing a multiplayer game with someone else, where like it always changes, even though the rules never change. Here, this comes from the randomness in the game, for example.
Okay, I'll tell you what I played, what I play, and what I played in the past, just so that you have an idea of my my limited
Yeah.
experience. Um, I mean, the video game probably I played the most was Pokemon when I was a kid.
Mhm.
So I enjoyed that kind of strategy, together with a bit of a story. That I rebought recently actually with the Nintendo Switch, although I haven't played really much. But anyway, I played recently Silk Song. I don't know if it's a platform that's became very popular.
Yep.
I found it very hard.
It's very
I think it's supposed to be like that, but a bit too much, too frustrating in a sense. I would like to progress a bit faster sometimes.
Yep.
Um, and a game that maybe is a bit more instead. Well, I'm not sure. more similar to what you describe,
Oh.
that I liked a lot. I haven't played in ages, but I played for some time on Steam. Was Portal,
Mhm.
which is more kind of puzzle-like.
Yeah.
In a sense that I could play it again because it doesn't
Solutions
matter.
now, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter what's the story. I just want to see if I can figure it out. I mean, probably that's maybe a very maybe just particular. Just every level is a puzzle, and I guess some other video games are a mix of different mechanics. But that's my background, sort of.
Yeah, I think more and more games are ending up in this space, and they have been pushing for 30 years to be kind of like endlessly replayable, kind of, because they're not fixed puzzles that once you know the solutions are no longer interesting, nor are they just fixed narratives where, again, once you play the narrative, you know the solution and it's no longer interesting, right? A lot of these games
Okay.
are just like games where you can get better at something, or you explore new variations of stuff. I think that's been a stronger and stronger and stronger trend. Kind of that's the evolutionary pressure is pushing video games.
To
Video
that.
games developed out of kind of like the simple arcade side of things, and out of people trying to reproduce books and movies, kind of, but they end up becoming their own thing, and that is this much more kind of like a generator of interesting challenges that never stops generating them for you, kind of.
I guess that's also why people talk a lot about side quests in video games, like not having just one linear narrative,
Yeah.
because then as you said, it would be one off, one use, but the ability of going back and try a different path, or just enjoy some side tasks.
And that's the stuff I think that we can expect in the future, right? Like games that will never end. We have the ability to create kind of like worlds and narratives and systems that just continue and continue and continue forever without human input, kind of. That's the thing that I think is economically rewarded. And we'll say a bunch of different flavors of this, like sprawling things.
Okay, last thing. So if you had to recommend me, or recommend to me a video game, and a board game, let's say, that that you think I might like that you know me a little bit, but also in general you think it's worth to try. Uh, I know you mentioned quite a few, but I actually forgot. I have to rewatch the.
Yeah, this is hard so much. I wanted to give you like an example of one of those games to play that are like endlessly replayable, kind of, but I honestly don't want to give you that.
Okay, it was something
And
different.
I want to give you something that's a short linear experiences where you take something away after like 2 hours, which again is more like a movie than a video game. But there's a game called The Beginner's Guide.
Okay.
And if you're at all interested in like how people make games and how it feels to make a game and release a game or something, this is a good one. It's called The Beginner's Guide.
Okay.
I promise it's short, and it's much more of a movie of a game, but like I think you'll like it.
Okay.
And then on the board game side, things that you haven't already played. I like it because it's weird. Okay. I have this at home because it's weird. It's so fucking weird.
Okay. QE.
That's
Okay.
quantitative easing. So this is a game about printing money. The whole
Okay.
for this game is that you are different governments in the world, and it's the financial crisis, and you have the ability to make money out of thin air. How do you behave?
Perfect. I know nothing about finance and economy. I mean, I'm very, very uneducated about that. So I think that would, I'm curious.
Play it with a couple of people. It doesn't matter if they know or do not know anything about finance. It doesn't matter. Like, it is a really weird game. It's also probably like hard to get on the internet. So I'm happy to give you my copy to play with.
Maybe that's easier.
It was hard to find, but like that's a game where like a designer did like a weird thing that no one else has done before, or maybe ever again, kind of. And it really works for a couple of games, and you learn something about the world. Yeah, where the mechanic is the message. The mechanic is the message in this. In the beginner's guide, the mechanic is absolutely not the message. The message is the words and the images on screen. Very different.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you so much again. Thank you everyone for watching, and yeah, maybe we'll talk about AI again and all these things in a couple of years. Who knows?
Who knows? Thanks for just go. Fun.